This is a story about Joe. Joe lives by himself in an apartment building. He has no siblings and his parents have died. He has an orange cat named Spike, who is his close companion. Joe spends most of his time at home and gets his groceries delivered because he feels anxious whenever he leaves his apartment. Joe is a very private person. A year ago, he was diagnosed with a serious illness and was given 3 to 6 months to live. Only he and his nurse practitioner are aware of this, and Joe has just pushed it out of his mind. His next-door neighbor, Peter, has lived in the apartment beside Joe for 40 years. The two of them spend their evenings watching TV together at Joe's place. Their favorite TV shows are medical dramas. One night, the episode is about a person who dies after several rounds of CPR, being on a ventilator for a month, and the family finally deciding to let him go, and the person dies. Joe thinks to himself, I'd hate to go like that. I don't want all that aggressive treatment. It would feel like a physical assault to me. If I had my choice, no matter how sick I was, I would choose to stay at home in my apartment, with Spike on my lap and Peter beside me on the couch. Joe thinks about mentioning this to Peter, but decides against it, thinking, oh, it's too morbid to talk about death. One night, Joe wakes up feeling like there's an elephant sitting on his chest. He's nauseated and terrified and calls 911. When the paramedics arrive, he has collapsed. They perform CPR and use a defibrillator to get a weak pulse. Joe is transferred to the hospital by ambulance with the sirens blazing. Peter, being a very heavy sleeper, doesn't hear a thing. The next morning, he wakes up and knocks on Joe's door. He hears Spike meowing, but there's no sign of Joe. Knowing that Joe rarely leaves his apartment, Peter's very worried and calls all the hospitals looking for his friend Joe Smith. But there's no record of him anywhere. Meanwhile, Joe, never having regained consciousness, is put on a ventilator and the search begins for his family. The doctor, after checking his wallet, discovers that this man's full name is Johal Sandhu, and he gets in touch with the only relative they can find, his aunt. She and Joe talk a few times a year, but not since he was diagnosed. The aunt talks to the doctor by telehealth, and when asked what Joe would want, she says she doesn't really know, but assumes they should do everything possible. He's kept on the ventilator for a few weeks, and then his aunt consents for him to be taken off the machine, and he dies a few minutes later. Days later, the apartment manager calls Joe's aunt and asks what should be done with the mangy cat they found in his apartment. The aunt tells them, just donate it to the local shelter, I don't know. Peter never knows what happened to his best friend Joe. It torments him for years.